Dear friends, good evening. If you're comfortable doing so, would you please rise as we begin with a prayer for the state of Israel. Sur Yisrael v'goalo, Ruach Amenu v'olamenu, Barech et Medinat Yisrael be'et mitzukatenu. Rock and Redeemer of Israel, Spirit of our people and of our world, bless the state of Israel in these troubled times. Protect it with your abundant compassion and spread over it the shelter of your peace. Strengthen the hands of those who guard our holy land and grant life and serenity and salvation to all its inhabitants. Send forth your light and truth to its leaders, judges, and elected officials, that they should walk in the way of justice, freedom, and integrity, and act in the best interests of the collective with love, kinship, peace, and friendship. Bless and safeguard the lives of our brothers and sisters who have been taken into distress and captivity. Break their chains, bring them out from darkness to light, and return them to the loving arms of their families, as it is written, so that God's redeemed ones return and come with song to Zion, crowned with everlasting joy. And may you fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation. May we learn of war no more. And let us say, Amen. Please be seated. I'm Rabbi Joshua Davidson, and I am honored to welcome you to Temple Emanu-El and our Streicker Cultural Center for tonight's most important panel discussion, moderated by wonderful author and documenter of Jewish life, whose wisdom really helped formulate the vision for what would become our Streicker Center, Abigail Pogrebin. And now to introduce the evening, I'm honored to call upon one of our Temple's great leaders and one of UJA Federation's great leaders, Kim Hartman.
Hi, good evening. Today is day 215. It's truly unfathomable. So while you came here tonight to bear witness to the unspeakable horrors, I want to share a few things with you that I think will leave you feeling empowered. All of us in this room are here because we care. Whether you've gone to Israel since October 7th, or you've visited the Nova exhibit, which is downtown, shout out, you must not miss it. Or, like the almost 1,000 of you showed up here tonight, you are doing something that is incredibly important at this time, showing up. Next, I am proud and happy to share with you that to date, with the help of many of you in this room, UJA has raised $198 million for their Israel Emergency Fund. Since October 7th, we have invested $1 million to support direct victims and witnesses of sexual violence, Zaka workers, professionals collecting testimonials, IDF soldiers, and so many more. UJA will also be using those IEF dollars to gather female leaders from places where sadly gender violence is the fabric of their community. The Ukraine, the Congo, Yemen, just to name a few. They will be putting together a steering committee of leaders and umbrella organizations representing women around the world who share the desire to connect on sexual violence against women, but let's be honest, human beings, to make sure that they are protected and that this doesn't happen again. Lastly, each of you has an opportunity to make a difference. Tell 5 people. Now you could tell more, but let's start with 5. Tell your friends, your families, your coworkers, whoever will listen, that you showed up tonight to see this film. You expect the same from them. We cannot afford to stay silent. We have a special message from Sheryl Sandberg, who wishes she could be here with us tonight. Sheryl, take it away.
Thank you all for coming together to watch Screams Before Silence. And thank you to UJA and the Temple Emanu-El Streicker Center for hosting this screening. I'm only sorry I can't be with you in person, but I am with you in spirit. Following Hamas's horrific attacks, events like this, where people can come together in community, are more important than ever. By gathering to watch this film, you are helping to make sure the victims and survivors of October 7th are heard. This has become the most important work of my life, because the politics of today, the polarization we face, are making us turn a blind eye to something that should be completely obvious. Sexual assault is never okay. Sexual violence is never what should happen. Rape is never and will never be resistance. No matter what you believe should happen in the Middle East, all of us should be able to come together to condemn the sexual violence of October 7th. Instead, so many years after we established that we believe women, too many people are ignoring, or even worse, denying this truth. That's why this film is so important. That's why all of you being here to watch this film is so important, and I am so grateful. This documentary enables anyone to hear directly from first responders, experts, and released hostages. It gives all of us the opportunity to bear witness. As we hear the stories from women who are no longer here to speak for themselves, we become their voice. We show the world what we're up against. We vow this will never happen again. And we scream after their silence.
Good evening. I'm Abigail Pogrebin, and it's in all of my moderating experience, I think this is the hardest bridge to cross between this film and now a conversation, but it's an important one. I just want to give you all just a minute to just sit for a second and ask the panelists to come up, and I will introduce them. Simcha Greneman is Deputy Commander of Israel's leading search and rescue organization, Zaka. He's been volunteering for Zaka for the past 30-plus years, and he oversees groups in charge of conducting Chesed Shel Emes, honoring the dead by bringing bodies to burial, which is considered, as we all know, one of the greatest mitzvot in Judaism. Dr. Ruth Halpern Kadari is a former member of the UN Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, founding director of the Rachman Center for the Advancement of the Status of Women, Bar-Ilan University, and she co-founded the Dina Project 710. And Eitan Schwartz is co-producer of the film you just saw. He spent most of his career in Tel Aviv City Hall, overseeing international affairs, and before that, founded a coalition of Israeli human rights organizations that fought to release Sudanese asylum seekers who were detained for entering Israel illegally. After October 7th, Eitan volunteered to take hundreds of foreign reporters to visit the Gaza envelope and expose them to the atrocities committed by the Hamas terrorists. Simcha, I want to start with you. We just saw you in the film. I could say thank you forever, but I just want to start with what it feels like to see the denialism as someone who saw these things firsthand. Was it expected at all? And as you saw it kind of get a certain kind of momentum of rejectionism, questioning of the facts and the truth. What has been your response?
Well, first of all, thank you for having us. And it's important that we continue, as you said before, to spread out the voices and being the voices, each one that sees the video. The main question of denial, we right away at the beginning, we felt that that's what's going to happen. As a Zaka member, before we start even to process to become a volunteer in Zaka, the first thing that we do is sign a contract. And on that first thing that we sign is never take a picture. Or even take out your phone.
Don't take out your phone or take a picture when you get to a scene. That's part of the contract.
Because the purpose of understanding respectful by not taking any pictures, making sure that there is no images floating around of scenes and hard situations like these. But after seeing the scenes and understanding what's going on, we got a special request from the government and the chief rabbi of Israel. And we were ordered, you have to take pictures.
So this, I just want to make sure everyone understands, this felt different to everyone who came to the scene at Zaka. And when you say it had to go up to the chief rabbi, there had to be essentially a halachic
For sure.
Approval.
For sure. Now, the point of having all these questioning all the time, are there pictures, aren't there pictures, why we don't let the pictures come out? Well, there's close to 200,000 images by the police and special forces that they're going through all these images. The first reason is, as we said, by respecting the death, by not spreading out all these pictures. And there's another reason that they're keeping it, because we have terrorists in jail, that if we spread out some of the images and pictures, they'll be able to use it against the truth. So we cannot for sure let out those pictures.
And when you showed Sheryl Sandberg those pictures, I want to be clear, because I don't think it was clear in the film, but you told me in the green room that part of why you're showing her on your phone is because these are not disseminated. The only way you can see them is because of who actually has possession of them.
When I came to speak at the UN, that was after I met Eitan. Eitan met me in the scenes as deputy commander for 2.5 weeks, collecting the bodies, parts of bodies, and then 18 weeks cleaning the houses, the cars, every place that we found blood, made sure that every drop of blood, bones, and tissue samples gets to burial in the proper way. So I came to UN with all the images and videos, pictures, all the information, whatever they had to have, and I was questioned way before I left Israel by the police and different lawyers and special forces, just to make sure that what we have is 100% showing all the images and everything that stands in front of the law, for sure. And those pictures can never go out to the public. So I sat in front of Sheryl. I said, okay, I'm willing to bring you to see it, so you no one never can say that someone made up the story. So I was showing her the full evidence.
Thank you. Ruth, can I go to you? This denialism is something I think you've taken on, I think, as strong as anyone. What is the challenge here for those of us who say, kind of, what is the problem? It's very hard to fathom that there is not only denialism, but a questioning of actual proof. How do you go about this when it seems so obvious to so many of us?
I think it took me a while, and a few weeks had to pass by before I could reflect back on the very first days and to try to understand the reaction of what we call the world. On the very first week after October 7, on the very second day, on October 8, on Sunday, I reached out to a former colleague on the CEDAW committee, the UN committee in which I served for 12 years, and I recalled that that colleague is now in a position within the UN as the Undersecretary General, the Special Representative for Sexual Violence in Conflict, Pramila Patten, and it occurred to me that she is in the most relevant and accurate position within the UN to help us get out to the world what happened. And the first question she asked me is, do you know if it really happened? And I was taken aback. And after a few minutes, I understood that we really had to be sure, and we cannot just live by rumors that we're already spreading on the net and hearing stories about films which we could not see. And we need to actually get the witnesses from those who had been there. But, and here's the challenge, most of the victims, the vast majority of the victims, had been murdered. That was part of the plan of Hamas, not to leave living traces, living victims. And those who survived were taken hostage to Gaza. But already on those very first days, we understood that there are very few living survivors, victims of sexual violence, who are unable to speak, and they're unable to speak still now, being too traumatized. And then we started the process, and as I said, after a few weeks, I could understand the very first reaction of my colleague, who asked me if we know it really happened, because she already envisaged this denialism that we're talking about, and she already knew that this was going to be an extremely, extremely hard journey in getting to the truth and setting the record straight. And we now know that on the very day of October 7, they already started a new battlefield, a new battle zone, which is the battle over the narrative and the battle over the truth, which goes on in the media and in social media. And again, comparing our experience to other areas of sexual violence during conflict times, and as we speak, there are more than 20 places in the world where sexual violence is being used as a weapon of war. But the case of October 7 is unique in the sense of not having living survivors. But when the first eyewitness, who's also shown parts from her investigation are shown in the film that we've just seen, when that first eyewitness came forward and the IDF presented it in a press conference to the foreign media, that was on November 14. So a little more than a month, 5 weeks after October 7. So that's when the world knew somebody who tells in a very, very graphic details firsthand of what she saw, what she witnessed. That's when the denialism could no longer take place. And now we're 7 months after October 7, and we have the report by the special representative.
Well, before we get to that, the report came out 5 months after. It was quite late. You were very instrumental, I think, in getting Pramila Patten to come. They issued a statement that says there are reasonable grounds to believe, that feels like fairly soft language to me, but let's leave that. There are reasonable grounds to believe that conflict-related sexual violence, including rape and gang rape, occurred across multiple locations of Israel and the Gaza periphery during the attacks on 7 October. So that was the UN finally making a public statement. Can you just give us a little bit of a background, just briefly, Ruth, but what was the kind of behind-the-scenes tensions around this?
The tensions came both from within the Israeli government, the skepticism and the distrust of Israel towards the UN. Some of it is obviously justified. And the hesitancy from actually allowing a UN body to come into Israel and to conduct a quasi-investigation or gathering information and being shown investigative materials by the police, by the IDF, by the Shin Bet. So there was a lot of resistance, mostly from the political branches in Israel, and we had to overcome this. We had to again, also based on my own acquaintance with this particular UN representative, to say that she can be trusted, that we have no choice but to allow somebody, the most trustworthy person, to come in and to conduct such a mission. Otherwise, the world is not going to believe us. It's not enough that we in Israel are conducting an investigation. We have to have the most authoritative body to come and find out what actually happened. And the other part of the findings is with respect to the hostages, where they found that there is clear and convincing evidence that the hostages had been subject to sexual abuse and to rape, including rape, and it is ongoing. This is ongoing, and it's ongoing as we speak.
Okay, I just want to bring Eitan in. You said, I think, at least I read in at least one interview, that you wished you didn't have to make this film, that you wish this film didn't have to be made, and other than the fact that obviously we want to honor these voices who can't be heard. What was the driver for you, mainly, in making sure this happened and happened fairly quickly?
I'll take you back. It seems like decades ago, but it was really just a few months ago. So when the war began, as you said, I began volunteering with foreign media. I had experience with foreign media. I took hundreds of reporters down to the South, and it was very clear from the very first moment that this story of sexual violence that was slowly starting to emerge was met with a lot of skepticism, and I realized there was something that we had to tell on a larger scale. I went to a friend of mine who's a producer we worked before in the past, Meni Aviram, one of the most important production companies in Israel. We are both very friendly with Joey Lowe. We went to Joey and Carol, his wife, who are philanthropists. We said, we have to create this documentary. We have to do it now, and this has to come out ASAP, because there's a timeline here, and the world is still willing to listen to us, but as wars progress, it was very clear to me, I've been through many wars in Israel, that the world will lose patience with Israel, the world will lose attention to this war, and this is the moment to shout out this story. And Joey and his wife Carol immediately said, yes, we'll finance the film, and then we needed somebody to lead it, because who wants to hear about sexual violence in a documentary for an hour? Such a tough topic. And Sheryl Sandberg was one of the few people who were speaking at the time. So she was at the United Nations. She wrote a few pieces about it. And they suggested we approach her. We didn't know her. And a person like Sheryl Sandberg, with her gravitas, if you propose something like this to her, we would expect it would take weeks of conversation for her to contemplate dealing with such a topic, trusting people she doesn't know. And within 5 minutes, she said yes. And she was on a plane, and a month later, we shot it. So this was done in very, very quickly. The issue as Professor Kadari said, the issue of skepticism was there from day one. We are talking about college campuses now, but I remind us all that the first protest on universities supporting Hamas against Israel was on October 12th, if I'm not mistaken. So it was the first week of the war when we already saw people supporting Hamas. And now something that we all realized, and this is very, very hard to think about, some of these people we are talking about, who in their twisted minds see Hamas as liberation, as a liberation organization, as freedom fighters, in their logic to liberate their homeland, and their supporters believe that killing people is okay. Killing Israeli men is okay because they're either soldiers now or they used to be soldiers. If they're kids, they will be soldiers one day, so that's also legitimate. The same goes for women. But in their twisted minds, or even in their twisted minds, while killing might be okay, rape is not. It was clear that there's something here that they weren't willing to admit because this is something they cannot contain in their own twisted way of looking at what's going on. And that gave us extra drive to bring this forward.
I just want to pause there for a minute because I did read reports that even Hamas representatives had disavowed that this happened because they said that's not what we do, and that in a sense, this had sort of botched their storyline in some way, that they are disavowing it because they're very invested in this not being a story. Is there anything that you have sort of concretely?
Yes. So I don't know how many people here follow, but in Israel, we were glued to this 24/7. So we were on the Hamas Telegram channels 24/7 in Israel. There were videos that were on these official channels of the Hamas that were removed several days later. There were images that surfaced and then couldn't be found. So somebody running these social media platforms, I think, realized at one point that this is, it might sound weird to say it in these terms, damaging for the Hamas image, for these images to be circulating. They didn't manage to remove most of it, but there's some stuff that we know was there and we can't find today. Professor Kadari and I discussed this. I think at one point, somebody on their side realized that this was wrong for their narrative, wrong for their public relations effort. So while on one hand they did want to terrorize the Israeli public, they wanted us to feel this terror of our women being raped, they realized that on a global scale, this is actually not good for an organization that is trying to present itself as a liberation organization. And I think one of the reasons that we have heard so many people denying it is because they cannot come to admit that this organization they might be supporting or might be identifying with is indeed a genocidal terrorism organization.
And Eitan, we talked before when we had our preparatory call last week, you said that you had real discussions about how graphic these photos should be, the footage should be, and some of the testimony. Can you just give us just some insight into weighing that decision?
So there's several reasons for that, why there's very, very little graphic image or archival image here. So one is out of respect for the dead. Obviously, there are people whose faces we do not want to see, even though the images, of course, were broadcast and you could identify many of the people that you see at the Nova site or in other places. There's also something very, very artistically, the director, Anat Stalinsky, made a decision knowing that there's something more horrifying about imagining what the people are talking about than actually seeing it. There's something more powerful about that. And then there's another practical reason that must be said. We knew from day one this would be material that would be very hard to find somebody to distribute and host, a mainstream television channel or a streamer. And we were right. And very early on, we decided that this would be on YouTube for everybody to watch. But the thing that's common about all these platforms is they have very, 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 very strict policies when it comes to showing graphic content. And we knew we would also have to make there's some kind of trade-off here between showing everything that happened, because for some people this might be the only thing they've seen about October 7th, but making sure this wouldn't be flagged and then removed quickly. We want this film, which is on YouTube right now, to live forever. So therefore, not only did we raise money to create the film, we then went on to seek money to promote the film, and that's where UJA Federation came in, and numerous other philanthropists, and we're very, very grateful for all of them. The film has been on YouTube for a week and a half now. It's been seen by 1.5 million people. But thanks to your money and the money of many other donors, many people are being targeted with this material through different trailers, and I won't go into the numbers, but the exposure this has been, this has received in the American audience is overwhelming and way beyond our expectations. And we couldn't have released this film, I think, with more graphic content. It wouldn't have been picked up neither by a television platform or by an online platform.
Thank you. Simcha, you testified at the UN, and I just want to read what you said afterwards. You said, "I went to speak in the UN about women's rights and stood there before the world, explaining what the women went through in those minutes, standing there instead of them, the women, telling the story of what they went through." The idea that you have to essentially be the storyteller now. Can you just speak as personally as you're comfortable about what it feels like to have to do that again and again now?
It's not easy at all. On a daily basis, I'm a carpenter. I have my own trade, my own business, and as a volunteer for 32 years, going around the world, helping the world in tragedies, in different situations. Like a year ago, we were in Turkey, helping Muslims. A few years ago in Bombay, Surfside, 9/11, Egypt, many countries around the world. Doesn't make difference the culture, or it doesn't make difference who we're going to help.
Well, I want to pause there and say, I read, if I'm right, that you also, because you took care of everybody, you were taking the bodies of Hamas fighters as well for burial.
By respecting and understanding what humanity is, we collected the terrorist bodies also, over 1,500 bodies.
How many?
Over 1,500 terrorists. But standing and seeing the scenes itself, all these people, how they were butchered, all these women, what they went through, I can't stop and stand aside and be silent. I devoted my life for this. I put my business aside. I put my family aside. I'm basically 2 weeks in Israel and 2 weeks around the world. Because after the Holocaust, we had Holocaust survivors. Over here, it's only me and my colleagues. Where are the evidence? We are the first responders that were on the scenes, saw the situation, and we could stand and shout for them. And this is what we're doing.
You said if it had happened anywhere else in the world, humanity would be screaming for justice. I invite whoever denies what we have dealt with to come and let me personally walk them around the scenes, show them what happened and where it happened.
I was standing speaking about it in one of the countries, and I was attacked by a reporter. So I said, okay, you have any stories that I said or I told or I showed out whatever information that it's not, you have any denial? She says, no, you're making up stories. Oh, that was in one of the countries that I personally went with Sheryl Sandberg. And I had Sheryl standing next to me, so it was easier for me to just face him. And I said, okay, now that you, for sure, anyone else is feeling that way, I said, okay, come over, I'll show you the pictures. The same pictures that I showed Sheryl. I took out my phone, I have it with me always, and I showed him in front of 500 people. And I said, this is what you're denying. Do you see me as a commander standing over here? You see me on the scenes. 27 years serving in the Army, in Special Forces, so I know what the pictures have to be for the scenes itself. to be able to use them in court. You have to see the background. You have to see who's in charge. You have to see who's giving the orders. And this is what I have. And I said, okay, now, in front of everyone, are you still denying? He did not say anything.
Ruth, and we're going to go to questions soon, folks, so be thinking. You said that you have been criticized by some for your remarks in this film asserting that the sexual violence was premeditated, that it was organized in some way, that it was planned. You invited me, I hate having to ask this question, but you invited me to draw out, at least, to those who are questioning how you can make that statement of a pattern. I'd love to give you a chance to respond.
When we see that the same method of sexual violence was repeatedly used in more than one place, in several locations, and I'm not going into details whether we have clear evidence about 6 different locations or 7 different locations, I'm not going into that, but it was in many locations at the same time, the same pattern of not just rape, but rape in a certain manner, in the most gruesome and brutalizing manner, combined with mutilation. So this extent of cruelty that was exercised in more than one location in relatively short span of time, because even though, as we saw in the film, it felt for hours, and it was hours, but it was less than 10 hours. So it's not something that went on for days and days. It was relatively short span of time, many locations, same methodology. We have these pictures, we have the eyewitnesses, the first responders that all describe repeatedly the same pattern, which was also found by the UN team, the same pattern of naked bodies, undressed, completely undressed, or partially undressed, in positions that leave no doubt, and with shots directed at the genitalia. So all this is a method that shows that it could not have been unless this was planned and unless this was premeditated. So the systemic nature is actually deduced from the evidence, from the indications that we have on the ground, and we know from research from other cases in the world that these kinds of mutilations and of sexual assaults and directing the gunshots and directing the assaults to the genitalia of women and also of men is something that is typical to such organizations and such entities that use sexual violence as a weapon of war, that weaponize women in order to use it as a weapon of war. So the evidence from the ground, this is what gives, at least me, from my perspective, the ability to conclude that this was systematic and it was premeditated.
Okay. Eitan, before we go to question, I just want to point out at least one scene, there are so many, that in a way stays with me the most, and it's the trees scene. And the choice there, to go there, to be there, it again, as you said, we're imagining and listening to things that we're not seeing or hearing. Can you just talk about that scene in particular, which is just obviously one of many with all of the incredible interviews?
The one down in the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was shot. It must be said when in one of the other scenes that was shot in the same area, there was an explosion, and the person speaking then hugged Sheryl and the director. So we were shooting when fighting was still, well, fighting is still going on officially, but then there were still a lot of missiles still going on, and just going down south there was very, very unusual for a documentary. It's very, very interesting to see these things from the perspective of somebody coming from outside, because as Israelis and people that have been living it, it's almost like October 7th is one long day that's been going on for many of us. It hasn't ended. The day is still going on. But to see Sheryl and to see her crew and her people, the way they saw it, how arbitrary it all looks. By the way, I think people are shocked to see how close to Tel Aviv this is. When we talk about a country and the borders of a country, this is a 60-minute drive from the center of Tel Aviv. And the site of the party is a jog away. It's like less than a mile away from the border. And I think seeing how close everything is there is amazing. I want to say one thing about Sheryl, because I think this really happens once in a lifetime for anybody who engages in this type of project. She has been so amazing from day one. She has personally and professionally so much, I wouldn't say to lose, but there's so much at stake here. Dealing with an issue which is so tough, in an issue that is so polarizing, and saying yes and just giving her trust and diving into this from day one, putting her name on this, attaching her name, working hard to get this distributed, it's amazing. And then the way she conducted the interviews, though she's not a TV personality by profession, shooting for 12 hours a day, it was just amazing. The result is amazing. We couldn't have had somebody better doing this.
Okay. Thank you all. We have our trusted mic folks. I'm just going to beg this New York audience to really ask a question as much as you might want to make a statement, because we want to get to all that we can. Do you have anyone, Ari?
Thank you for making this amazing form of bearing witness. It makes an incredibly airtight case for the utter evil of the organization that committed these atrocities. With that in mind, I believe that it makes a strong case for the utter elimination of that organization, Hamas. In light of that, there is one person in this world that must see this video, and that's the President of the United States. Has he seen this video? He must be made to sit there for an hour to watch this video.
Okay. Eitan, you want to say anything about that? Very briefly. This is like after the sermon, everyone goes and has a meal. Just if everyone could be a little bit quieter if you're leaving. Thank you.
I will say that President Biden did see something else, which is what is known as a 47-minute horror film of the Hamas when he first came to Israel 2 weeks after the war began and showed his support. And there is a congressional screening of this film in 2 weeks. And hopefully everybody that can see this video will see this video. That's our goal.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll just add that in President Biden's remarks on the Holocaust Memorial Day, he did address the issue of sexual violence very explicitly, at least 3 times in his remarks, and his administration is very, very much on the topic. We engage with them directly. I had a meeting with the most senior aide of the White House just 2 days ago on the way forward in continuing the work that was done by the UN team. So I think that specifically Biden and this administration is definitely not part of the denialism. On the contrary.
We have someone, yes.
Has anybody presented this to the esteemed poison ivies of America, that the students at the universities that are, I'll use the word kindly, misinformed, should this not be shown at the very universities that are now attacking the veracity of what happened?
We have received numerous requests from organizations and student organizations throughout the country to screen this not only on university campuses, but actually on walls in front of the various encampments. And of course, we send a file to each and every person requesting that. And Sheryl herself is working very hard with Jewish organizations, student organizations, the National Council of Jewish Women, Hillel, to make sure that as many colleges and student organizations will have screenings of this film. Absolutely.
Thank you. Yes, we have one up there.
Okay. I'd like to know whether this film has been viewed by the United Nations, and what are they going to do about it if they come to the conclusion that there should be an investigation worldwide?
Did you hear the question? She's saying, has the UN viewed the film, and what are they going to do about it, and is there going to be an investigation?
So there had already been the beginning of, it wasn't titled investigation, but in fact, the visit of the Special Representative for Sexual Violence in Conflict was employing the same methodology of investigative bodies in the UN, the same methodology to collect the evidence and to analyze it and to report it. And one of the main recommendations of that visit, which was short, it was only 2.5 weeks, one of the main recommendations, which was also repeated by the Secretary General, was to continue this and to engage in what's known as a platform of cooperation with the Israeli government in order to continue this work. So actually, it's now up to the Israeli government to sign this framework of cooperation to allow for a continuation of this kind of work of fact-finding and coming up with more conclusions that will be included in next year's Secretary General's annual report. And the aim is to reach the goal of blacklisting Hamas, of attributing all these atrocities to Hamas itself, to have as many more countries regard Hamas as a terrorist organization, to eventually have the UN regard Hamas as a terrorist organization, which is really an extremely difficult thing to get because of Russia and China that have a veto power. But they definitely intend to continue with this work, and we hope that the Israeli government will also be willing to allow them to continue this work.
Okay.
I just want to add that 2 weeks ago there was a screening for press, and Miss Pramila Patten was invited by Sheryl Sandberg, and she came to this. So this is not something she had to do. She could have seen this film on YouTube like everybody else. So just showing herself at the screening, I think that also testifies to that's an important statement.
Gotti, next one.
I have a question to ask you. Supposedly, when this first came out, and the Hamas had written instructions as to what to do with the people they captured, rape, or whatever else. Were these papers seen? Did they have copies of them? Why wasn't this put on the film, and why didn't they say this in the first place?
I will answer to that to the best of my knowledge. In the selection process in this film of what goes in, we made a point of making sure that there is no way of attacking any one of the testimonies or the things that we present in any other way. So for instance, something I have seen in my own eyes, there was like a dictionary, not a dictionary, like these forms found on bodies of Hamas terrorists that had phrases in Arabic and how you say them in Hebrew. So for instance, there's a phrase, take off your pants. So many thought this might mean the beginning of some kind of sexual violent act. But that isn't 100% necessarily the case. It might be take off your pants so we can see if you have a gun, for instance. So when we had the slightest doubt if to include something in the film, we always went lechumra, as we say in Hebrew. We wouldn't include anything we weren't sure 100% that makes our case or could be later be challenged. So while there are many documents that indicate, I think the basic thing about when you think about this jihadistic culture is when we talk about an organization, or a culture that promises martyrs that kill people and then go to heaven, that there will be 72 virgins waiting for them, I think it is pretty clear to make the assumption that the relationship between genocidal acts and then later sexual crimes is a pretty clear link to make. I don't think that is something that we really have to prove. The other thing is, and this is also something that was part of the process of the film, if we remade this film 3 years from now, we would have much more to show probably. The IDF and the police are going through unbelievable amounts of materials that haven't been deciphered yet. And as Professor Kadari said, there are probably victims living in Israel today which are unwilling to come out and tell their story. And in that deliberation, do we come out quickly with this film or wait for years for this to be over with and then we have the retrospective? We decided to go with the first option.
Will you make a second film?
A continuation of this?
Yes. You should say yes and screen it at the Streicker Center.
As we said, we're very sorry we had to make the first one. We are very hopeful we will not have additional stuff to show, and we all fear in Israel that we will. And I think that's the main message. We still have 19 women among the 132 which are still being held captive. I'm not taking this off, but it seems to me that 7 months later, people stopped talking about the fact that there are 132 people being held in tunnels, and this is how this all began in the first place.
So is this a yes? You're going to make a second film or no?
If there is a second film, we'll come here, Gadi.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're going to take two last questions. Yeah. Yes, I know. Yeah. 1 second. We're going to take the two last questions. I want to thank you all for staying through the evening. I want to thank the panelists for coming all the way from Israel. And of course, I want to thank Abigail Pogrebin, who always says yes to the Streicker Center, who does a great job, who volunteers her time for our community over and over again. So thank you very much. The last two questions, go.
Yes. Why not be more aggressive? There are 4 Jewish senators in the United States. I've heard nothing from them. Why not a full-page ad at the New York Times every day? Come see our 200,000 pictures. Why not the next day to the Squad? Come see our 200,000 pictures. And a series of an aggressive thing to bring this. Your movie's nice. Your movie is good. But it's not, there needs to be more. 1.5 million views on YouTube. Unfortunately, that's less than a 5-year-old singing on America's Got Talent. Why not using the UGA movie?
Thank you.
Gadi, can we hear the second as well, and they can both answer?
Sure.
The second question, sir?
Go ahead.
I just want to congratulate you. This is just... Okay. My question is, are you going to do other things to help Israel tell the story? Hamas seems to put out such great PR, and the Israeli government has been locking at it. Everybody seems to be upset about that, and I wanted to know whether you can get involved to help this.
I think the two questions are related, and I think this is something that many of us are struggling with. What is the right strategy? And we must also not fall into pitfalls of completely politicizing the whole issue, because there are these arguments that maybe the Israeli government is actually overemphasizing the sexual violence and the gender atrocities in order to justify what it is doing in Gaza. There are many, many claims, many people who see all this and say that this issue is being instrumentalized. So we have to walk a very, very thin line. And there could be others who say, like the gentleman here who asked before, that all our all our efforts should be more aggressive. I don't share this view. I think that just like the film is there's even subtlety in it, and the fact that the graphics are not shown and they are left for people to imagine, and whoever wants to see graphic, they can go, they can find the graphics somewhere else in YouTube or on the internet. I think that is a much more careful and powerful way to go, and also to avoid the too much politicization and instrumentalization of the issue. I do agree that there has to be much more to be done on this front, and we're facing a very vicious and sophisticated enemy in this war zone, the war over the narrative and the truth. This enemy is being aided by, again, Russia and China and Iran, of course. And in that respect, Israel has been far less prepared. And I think I'll leave it to Eitan, who was there right from day one on that front of fighting.
So if anybody can ask us what can we do, as Kim said, first, make sure each one of you sends this to 5 of your friends to see. That's how we get the message spread. I want to say again, thank you to Federation, which has helped us promote this film. We are constantly raising more funds to make sure that more and more people see it. And in general, as an Israeli, I want to say thank you and kol hakavod for everything you do. I know how much you help Zaka, an amazing organization. I know how much you help rape crisis centers in Israel, extremely important. I know how much you're helping get the content out like the ones we're doing. And it's very heartwarming, so thank you very much.
Thank you. I just want to say we are all in all of your debt. This is the hardest work there is, and you're on the front lines of it, and we're grateful. Thank you all.